Hello and welcome to today's tutorial where we are doing a soft, romantic, glowing look with a matte, softly smoky eye. This is my model Shelby and we are going to get started here first with some toning spray. This is the D'Alba First Serum Spray, and I am going to start off by misting that all over her face as my first little bit of skin prep. I'm going to give a nice generous spritz all over. Then I am going to go ahead and I'm going to use the Vichy Mineral 89 serum. It's a hyaluronic acid serum that helps to lock in the moisture, and I'm going to put it on this little aluminum tray. I like to put all of my skincare on these because it helps me keep things nice and clean and dip into that versus on a palette, so I can hold it right near the face and I don't have to worry about anything else dripping off. So I'm going to apply it with a wedge sponge. I'm going to start in the center of the face, and why I really like using this is because it absorbs into the skin and it bonds to the moisture that's there, and what it's going to do is create an ever so slightly tacky surface. Hyaluronic acid is a humectant. It holds about 1,000 times its weight in water, and so it is going to bind to any of the moisture in the skin and then bind to the moisturizer as well, and it's going to help to really lock everything all in place. And it's really important to make sure that you are getting under the eyes really well with the serum as well, because the under eye area tends to be very dry and we don't want that under eye area to end up looking cakey. And then lastly, I want to prep her lips with a little bit of the Laneige Sleeping Lip Mask in Vanilla. I found this is the perfect product to hydrate and soften and plump up the lips, and then we'll wipe it off before the end before doing our actual lip products. So now I'm going to go in with the Tatcha the Water Cream. It is a gel cream hybrid that is really great for all skin types. I'm going to scoop a little bit out and put it right back onto that palette. And I'm going to take my wedge sponge, dip it in, and start applying. I like this moisturizer a lot because it is like a gel cream hybrid, so it's going to absorb into the skin really nice and not leave anything on the surface that's going to interfere with how the foundation or concealer lays, but it's going to give some really good hydration to the skin. So I'm just kind of layering it on gently and working it in. After the moisturizer has absorbed, I'm going to go in with the Say Super Glowy in Star Glow, and I'm going to put some of that onto the tray. You can see here I'm using about a pump and a half, and I'm going to use that same sponge to hit the high points on the face. Since this is a dewy, glowy kind of look, I really like this serum gel kind of formula. It doesn't sit on the surface, and I really want to avoid the center of the face. I really just want to put it on the high points. If you have something that's really shimmery and adds a lot of reflection, it has a lot of mica, sometimes it can sit around the pores and emphasize them. So I'm just hitting the high points on the face above the brows, and if I have a little bit that maybe I've added too much or I feel like I've gotten a little too close to her pores, I can take the side of the sponge that had the moisturizer on it, and I can kind of use that like an eraser to remove some of the product. So I'm kind of alternating between using the application corner of it and the moisturizer corner in order to apply to the face. Now I'm going to use my foundation, and this is the Face Atelier, the Pro Foundation, and I have two different colors in 2 and 2.5, I think it was. And what I want to do is I want to see which one of these colors was the better shade for her. And so I am swatching them a little bit along the jawline. So I want to take a little bit of each of those, and I'm just using like a disposable doe foot applicator. And I want to kind of let it sit there on the jawline and let it start to kind of oxidize, and then take a look. These are really, really close in depth between the 2 and the 2.5. So I want to kind of let it settle onto the skin and see what looks better. But I also want to make sure that I am pulling together the color from the chest. I don't just want to test the foundation shade on one area of the body. The face, even though that's the place that we are putting the foundation, isn't the only color that we need to take into account. So I'm applying a little bit on her collarbone and tapping it in with my finger because I want to see which one blends the most. You can see this one here is a little bit lighter and the other one kind of blends in. So the slightly deeper shade actually blends in just a tiny bit better to her chest area. So what I can do is I can apply it to different areas of the face and kind of use a little bit of each color depending on where I'm applying it to get the most even and skin-like look that pulls together the shades on her face as well as the shades of her chest. So I'm going to have Shelby turn to the side, and I'm going to take a look at how those colors have oxidized. I want to see what the undertones look like, and I want to see if they have darkened up on her. Sometimes with the fairer shades, as they dry down, they can start to oxidize and they can darken a little bit. So I really want to make sure that everything is looking very seamless and very flawless. And ultimately, I ended up deciding that I could really use a combination of the two based on how they were applied to the face. I'm going to be using the slightly darker colors towards the perimeter of the face and the slightly lighter shade towards the center. And as you can see, when I kind of blend everything all together with the sponge, it just melts right in. So I could kind of really get away with either one of these two. But if I were to go with the lighter one, I would need to do a little bit more contouring, a little more bronzing. So I'm going to start out by using a foundation brush from my Kitco to apply the foundation starting in the perimeter of the face with that slightly darker shade. Now, for all of the products and the tools that I've used in today's tutorial, you can go down to the description and you can access it in two different ways. There is the makeup products that I have used, and all of those are available on my Shop My profile. So what you do is you just click that link, it's down there in the description, and then scroll over to where it says YouTube and click on that one. It'll be the photo of Shelby here with her makeup, and that will have all the products that I have used. The My Kitco brushes are not a part of that because they're not part of the Shop My affiliate program. So I have just put all of those in the description below with all of the different brushes that I have used. Now, if you're interested in more information, if you are a professional makeup artist and want some more in-depth education, there's another little link in my description box that says for pro makeup artists, and you can access my training PDF that goes along with this as well. So there's different ways. The Shop My, if you want to just shop for the products. Otherwise, you can fill out the little form on my website to get the full PDF. And again, it's going to break down the products that I used, but it's also going to give you a little bit of supplemental education to go along with today's tutorial. So you can see I'm taking this foundation brush and I am lightly buffing the foundation all over her face, and you can see it just matches really, really flawlessly. I'm going to be taking the lighter one and using that like a little bit of highlight towards the center of the face. But that slightly darker shade, it just melted into her chest so nicely that I knew when she was facing forward, that was what was going to be the most seamless blend between her face and her chest. I didn't want her to end up with like the floating head syndrome where it looked like she was just one color on her face and then her neck and her chest were completely different. So it's really important to make sure that you are testing the foundation on different areas of the body and that you are choosing the colors that are going to pull together in the most seamless way. And if you have areas that are a little bit lighter, like the center of the face, you can use a slightly lighter shade there, and the overall color, just the one that matches the neck or the chest the best, so that's the most seamless overall. So after I have applied with the brush, I like to go in with a damp beauty sponge and just press the foundation into the skin a little bit more. It helps to pick up any areas where the foundation might be a little bit heavier, any brush marks or anything, and just kind of gives it a more skin-like finish. Overall, I like to apply with a brush and refine with the sponge. Now, Shelby's foundation was a really beautiful match, so I didn't need to use any color adjusters, but I am taking a dot of this pink color adjuster from Face Atelier and I'm mixing it into her foundation shade. And what that's going to do is it's going to pick up a tiny little bit of the red that is part of that pink there, and it is going to mix with the yellow undertone to her foundation, and it's going to start to create a custom peachy shade. Now I'm just taking it a little bit and putting it onto a fluffy brush. This is a Real Techniques style brush. And I'm going to start to tap it underneath the eye. I'm not doing this with concealer. I am not putting in a corrector. I am customizing the corrector based on her skin tone already. So I'm utilizing the products that I've already applied and the products that I already have in my kit, which is her foundation color, and it matches her flawlessly. So I'm just adding a little touch of that pink to turn it into a peachy tone, and that's going to slightly start to neutralize underneath the eyes. So I'm applying a super thin layer, light tapping motions with my brush, and I just want to start to neutralize any discoloration under the eyes. We'll go in and we will refine with concealer later. Now that we have evened out her skin tone, it is time to start adding a little bit more depth and a little bit more dimension. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to contour. This is the new Soft Pinch Contour from Rare Beauty, and it is in the shade Gentle. And I'm going to be using this My Kitco brush, and what I really love about this one is that it is angled. So it is going to sculpt the cheeks really beautifully. And I put just a tiny little bit onto one of these trays, and I carry about 3 to 4 of these trays with me at a time so that I can have the foundation, the concealer, the contour, all of that kind of off to the side. I don't have to worry about them mixing up together, and I don't have to clean my palette off before I apply another product. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right at the actual cheekbone, and I'm going to start to tap it in. Now this is a duo fiber brush, so it is going to give a really soft airbrush finish, and I'm just going to work this back and forth along the cheekbone. I start out by tapping it onto the skin to apply the product, and then gentle back and forth motion. And then what I'm going to do to finish things off is I am going to do an upwards motion. I'm going to sweep that color up from where I applied it up towards the highest point of the cheek, and I'm doing that because I want to create a soft gradient from the top of the cheekbone where it is the lightest to the bottom of the cheekbone to where it is the darkest, and that is going to sculpt and carve out the cheek. Now, where the light hits is going to be the highest point, and where the darkest color is, it's going to recede that the most. So I want to always keep in mind how far down the cheek that I am applying. Then I like to go in with my blending sponge. It has just a little bit of foundation still on it, and I kind of just tap it all around the edges to make sure that I am getting a really soft, diffused look. I don't want a harsh line. That's not the style of this makeup. This is a very soft glam look. Very romantic. We just want to carve out the cheekbone just a little bit, give some dimension to the face. We're not trying to change the structure of her face too much. This is not the unidentifiable makeup trend. This is really just a very soft sculpting of the face. So again, I'm going back over with the sponge to blend everything out. If you feel like you've maybe applied too much, you can take your foundation brush and you can start to brush over the top and the bottom to start to diffuse those edges, again, just a little bit more. And you can see how we have lifted up her cheeks and sculpted and carved out her face. We don't want to get too close to the mouth. So again, I'm going to go with this foundation brush and I am going to wipe over those edges to make sure I didn't get too close to the mouth because I don't want to drag that area down. So now when I'm happy with the cheekbones, I am going to double check and see if I need contouring anywhere else. Now she has a really small forehead, so I don't need to do any contouring to the forehead because I don't want to make the forehead look any smaller. And she has a really nice oval shape to her face, so I don't need to put any on the sides here and make those areas recede at all. I can add a touch of color with some bronzer later. I also don't need to contour underneath her jawline because she has a really beautiful jawline and I don't want this effect to be too harsh overall. So I am just going to contour a little bit on her nose. And this brush here is very similar to my Kitco brush. It's just really small and it's going to allow me to place on the sides of her nose very detailed. I don't want to go too big and too fluffy with the sides of the nose. I don't want to get the product too much. So I'm going to start up at the inner part of her eyebrow and I'm going to start to kind of tap that in and take it down the side of the nose. Now I don't want a really rounded look to her nose. I just want to give it a little bit of definition. I'm not trying to draw a new nose on her. I'm not trying to change the shape too much. I just want to give a little bit of soft definition. So I am not going over the tip of the nose too much. I'm not applying a whole lot of product. I'm just going back and forth in a very thin line and I am softly kind of sculpting out the bridge of the nose. I'm adding just a little bit of depth and then just narrowing out the tip of the nose ever so slightly. I want to take it all the way up into the eyebrow because I want to connect that depth. It helps to create a more refined shape to the nose without just adding a bunch of color to the nose. I don't want to make the nose stand out. I don't want to call attention to the nose. I want to soften it. So after I have tapped away any excess color with the sponge, I'm going to take that concealer brush and again, I'm just going to go back over and diffuse and buff the edges so that we don't have any harsh lines to the nose because that's going to make the contouring there super, super obvious. Now I do want to do a little bit of contouring to her lips because her lips are a little bit on the thinner side. So I'm going to take a little bit of that on the tip of the brush and I'm going to very gently brush right along the bottom of the lip line and then over the edge of her top lip. I'm adding just a little bit of shadow at the lip line to make it look like the lips come off from the face ever so slightly and cast a shadow. I'm not trying to overdraw the lips with contour. We're going to overdraw the lips just a tiny bit with lip liner because, again, we're wanting a soft, romantic look overall. But I do that and then I soften with my concealer brush. Again, every time you apply contour, you want to make sure that you are going in with your sponge or a brush after and softening it back up. Now, I'm going to take this M Cosmetics Divine Water and I'm going to mist it all over the face because this is a really dewy, hydrated, glowy kind of look. So I want to put more moisture into the skin and help to melt all of these cream layers together. So I'm going to mist all over the face and then grab my blending sponge and start to tap. We want to press all of these layers and melt them all together so it has the most seamless finish and it looks the most skin-like. We want this to look like skin and just natural shadow and dimension to her face versus a harsh makeup-y kind of look. Next, I'm going to add a subtle bit of highlight by taking that slightly lighter foundation and I'm going to put it on this smaller concealer brush and I'm going to start to tap into the high points of the face again and towards the center of the face. And you can see this is not too harsh, it's not too strong. There's not a huge contrast between the foundation that we applied at the beginning, but I do want to add just a little bit of lightness to kind of start to sculpt the face a little bit more. But I don't want to go in with something that has a huge contrast and that is too much lighter than the foundation because that's when it starts to look really harsh and really obvious. So I'm going over the cheekbones, a little down the center of the nose, a little to the center of the forehead, a little over the top of the lip, and then I'm going to do just a tiny little bit to the center of the chin. We don't want to draw on big shapes and then try and blend them out. I find that it's a much more natural and subtle effect to apply it with a small, detailed, fluffy kind of brush. And if I want a little bit more contrast to that cheekbone there, I can apply just the slightest bit underneath that contour, and the contrast will suddenly make the contour look a little bit more dramatic without layering on too much product. Moving on to the cheeks, we are taking the Patrick Ta Duo Cream Blush with Powder Blush, and I am going to scoop out a little bit of the cream blush. And I don't need a whole lot because it's actually pretty decently pigmented and I want a soft base for the powder to go on. So now is when I break out my big palette and I scrape this out. I want to spread it out super thin and even over the surface because I can't take my brush and double dip into the cream blush from my kit and then put it on somebody else. I still want to be able to dip in and get an even layer on my brush. And again, this is another angled blush brush from a Real Techniques dupe. Go to the description if you want to know where I get them. And I'm just tapping it in and I am rotating it over the surface of the palette because I want to get an even thin layer all over. When I place this onto the cheek, I don't want a heavy amount in any one area. It's going to make the blending so much easier. So I'm just tapping it onto the cheekbone and I don't want to bring it too close to the center of her face. I want to give her a really nice lifted type of look. So I'm just taking it and I'm applying it directly to the cheekbone. I want to overlap a little bit onto that contour and melt the two colors together. That's going to give it some depth to the shadow, or excuse me, some depth to the blush so that it is not looking too much like blush just sitting there and awkwardly placed really high on the cheek. I want it to look like an actual natural flush, and we don't just flush in one place. So I'm going back and forth, applying very thin layers all over the cheekbone area, tapping it in. I don't want to get too close to the under eye. Sometimes with fairer skins in particular, if you get too close to the under eye area, it can start to look like they are tired. So I want to make sure that I am not getting too close and just tapping that product in right on the cheekbone. So if I feel like, oops, maybe I got it a little too high to the under eye, I don't want her to look tired, I'm just going to tap that out with the concealer and soften up that edge. Now I'm going to go in with my powder blush, and I am going to be using this one from Pat McGrath. I believe it is called Divine Rose, and it is a very similar shade to the Patrick Ta blush, but it has a little bit more pop to it than the Patrick Ta one. So I like the thin cream underneath to give some depth and some dimension, but I want to top it off with a little bit of a powder brush. So this is a My Kit Co brush, and I like it because it is soft, it is small, and I can get a really nice diffused look. But instead of tapping my brush and flicking off the excess, what I like to do is tap it down into the mirror of my palette or whatever product I'm applying, and that helps to push the loose powder deeper into the bristles and help to even it out over the surface, so that when I am applying it, no one area has too much pigment to it. I can get a really soft, really airbrush diffused kind of look. So you can see how soft and diffused and beautiful it is because I have a little bit of a nicely pigmented product and that really soft, fluffy brush. And then I just add a little tiny touch to the eyelids. Even though that we're going to be covering over it with eye product, I feel like just adding a tiny little bit of blush to the eye area, it helps it to just kind of pull together. And again, if I feel like I've gotten it a little bit too close to the center of the face, or if I just want to diffuse any edges, I go over it with my foundation brush. Now to enhance the glow, I'm going to be taking the Mesmerize in the liquid highlighter from Rare Beauty, and I'm going to put just a tiny little bit of it onto my palette. I only need the tiniest little bit because I want to strategically place a little bit of this glow. So I'm going to tap in my ring finger onto the palette and then start to tap it onto the face and apply it to the areas I want to catch the light. A lot of the glow is going to be coming from her skin and from that glowy foundation, the hydration spray, and just really melting everything together. And hydration, that's all going to give an overall glow, but I want to just hit the high points with a bit of extra reflection, and I find that this is the perfect product for that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to her brows, and I am taking a dual-ended spoolie. It is pink. You can see, if you're familiar with the Real Techniques ones, it is a dupe for it. So you can get the ones at Ulta from Real Techniques where it's got the fat spoolie on one end and the skinny one on the other. But inside my PDF, I share with you where I get a dupe for much cheaper. So I'm just kind of brushing through the brows now because I want to make sure that all the hairs are laying nice and that there isn't any dry, dead, flaky skin that kind of has gotten caught up in the brows. And then I'm going to take my brow pencil and I'm going to sanitize it with alcohol off screen so I'm not spraying alcohol in her face. And this is a little thumb cover. It is a little sponge. Again, another disposable that I share with you where I get it inside the PDF. So I'm taking this Patrick Ta brow pencil in medium brown. I find that even though it's a medium brown, it's not too dark. And since her brows naturally are a little bit darker, even though she's a blonde, I don't want to go with traditional blonde pencils. Those tend to be a little bit too warm or a little bit too light for her natural darker brows, and this blends really perfectly. So I'm starting along the bottom edge, and I am going with short brush-like strokes to define the bottom edge, and then combing through with the spoolie to soften up the edge, because I don't want a sharp, crisp line. This is not 2016 brows. We are doing really soft and very diffuse. So every time I go in and I apply some with the pencil, I'm going back in with the spoolie and softening it. Now, if I feel like I've made a little bit of a mistake, there's a harsh line, or I got a little bit too close, I'm going in with a Q-tip and I'm just wiping that product away and softening. Don't be afraid of making mistakes or taking a step back and really looking and saying, all right, do I like how this shape is? Have I gone too heavy? Have I gone too far in this direction? Do I like the placement of this color? And if you don't be afraid of going back in and softening up and diffusing with your foundation brush or with your sponge or taking a Q-tip and kind of wiping away. If you're constantly taking a step back and evaluating your color placement, how strong of a color that you are applying, the balance, it keeps it much more natural rather than just going in heavy, applying, and then trying to soften everything afterwards. It just gives a lot more natural, soft overall look to the face, and you find that at the end you have a lot more balance because you're constantly going back and evaluating. So now we are just taking a look at her arches and making sure that she has them even, and I'm brushing up through it to see, okay, are there any gaps that I need to put in or fill in towards the top inside there. So I need a little bit more along the top edge on this eyebrow. The eyebrows do not need to be super matchy-matchy. Just because you filled in one area on a brow doesn't mean that the same exact technique needs to be used on the other brow. Sometimes one brow will have a more defined arch and you don't need to add any color there, but you need to define the arch a little bit more on the other eye. So now I'm going to take the smaller end and I'm going to use that to apply the brow gel. But instead of sticking it all the way down inside the tube, and I'm using the NYX one, so you can see how it's a little tiny one that goes inside the tube. It matches the same size. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to squeeze just a little bit of it out and gently pick up the product that way. I find that you pick up less product and it is a little bit softer when you apply to the face. So I'm just kind of massaging that little bead that kind of stuck up, getting it worked into the bristles rather than sticking it all the way down in the tube, pulling out too much that I need to wipe off. Or if I apply, I have to really work it through. So it's just a technique that I found allows me to add thin layers of the brow gel. Now I'm not doing a laminated look. I just want to add a little bit of additional hold to her brows. So I'm applying and then I am brushing through with the fuller end to kind of soften everything back up. So it's time to move on to the eyes, and I am going to be using 4 of the different shades from Danessa Myricks, the Color Fix. I'm going to be using 2 nude shades and exposed plus blackout, and between the 4 of these shades I'm going to apply the color to shape out the eyelid and define the high points, the contouring, and then the black is going to go right in at the lash line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tiniest little dot of Nude 1. And I'm going to start to apply that to the eyelid, to the high points. And I'm taking a really small detailed brush from my Kitco, and I am going to start by applying it underneath the brow bone, really, really soft. I want a very diffused finish. I want a little bit of the skin to start to kind of peek through, but I want that light to hit where that brow bone is to kind of start to pull that forward a little bit. And why I really like shaping out the eye this way is because the Color Fix is very long wearing, very waterproof. So no matter how oily of a lid they have, it is going to last all day, and it's going to be the perfect base for your eyeshadow. I'm applying a little bit also to the inner corner. Sometimes I like to lighten that up with the Nude 1 first because it's not quite as harsh as a white, and I don't always want to highlight the inner part of the eye with a shimmer, but I still want a little touch of light to the inner corner of the eye. It adds a little bit of dimension, it kind of opens up the eye, it wakes you up so you're not looking so tired. And I'm just kind of softening and tapping out everything with my finger as I go. Now I'm just repeating the process over here on the other eye. You can see I am very, very softly going underneath the brow bone to add a touch of light and tapping everything out with my finger. And then I'm going to do the same thing to highlight the inner corner of the eye, adding a little bit of that light there. So now I'm going to go in with the Nude 3, and I am going to apply this all over the lid with a fluffy detail eyeshadow brush. Again, just the tiniest bit, and I want to do that to give a place for my eyeshadow to stick to and kind of start to block off a little bit of any discoloration on the lids. So after I have applied it all over the lid, I'm just going to kind of tap and press in and make sure that I have all of that discoloration covered. And you can see where it is just creating this natural looking base. I'm not drawing all over the eye. It's just matching her natural eye color, and it is looking like a very natural base. So I'm going to take a little bit of the shade Exposed on that my Kitco brush, and I'm going to start to map out the dimension on the eyelid. I want a soft, smudgy lash line, so I'm going to start to add a little bit of darkness and a little bit of depth along the lash line there with this shade in Exposed. And I'm going to soften that out up onto the lid. So you're going to see me going back and forth a lot between the different eye colors now, applying a little bit where I want to or where I need to, and just softening everything up. So I've started to apply a little bit to the outside corner as well, and you can start to see that little bit of dimension starting to come out. On the left eye here, I am applying again, starting at the lash line, and I am softly diffusing it up onto the lid and out a little bit, softening up any edges with the brush that I use to apply Nude 3, so that way everything is a nice cohesive look. Now before I move on, I just want to kind of soften up underneath the eyes where the heat of her skin and the moisture may have started to break up that under eye corrector. I just want to kind of soften that up now so it's not setting into any creased position. Now, before I go in and start applying the eyeshadow, I want to remove any tackiness from that color fix. So I'm taking a little bit of the Laura Mercier Secret Brightening Powder and a fluffy eyeshadow brush from my Kitco and just picking up a tiny little bit, whatever's kind of stuck to the lid of the jar there. And I'm going to lightly buff it over the eyes. What that's going to do is it is going to lay down a little bit of powder to remove some of that grip and allow the matte eyeshadows to blend more seamlessly into one another on top of this look. Now I'm going to take some eyeshadows. These are mattes by Viseart, and I don't remember exactly what palette these were originally from, but I have depotted them. So I am just picking up a shade of light peach that is very similar to her natural skin tone, and I am starting to tap that all over the eyelid. So for the nude color, I am focusing mostly on the center of the lids and very slightly and softly sweeping out to the outer corners and up into the brow bone. I don't want to pack on a ton of color right now. I just want a soft base so that when we go in with the crease shade, it blends out really, really softly. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with a detail brush. This is another one by my Kitco. I don't have it written down in front of me doing the voiceover afterwards, so you're just going to have to go down to the description to see which one it was. And I'm going to take this medium brown shade, again from the Viseart. I don't know if it's from the Mattes palette or one of the Grande Pros, but it is my favorite shade that I use all the time. It's just a soft medium brown. Anyone will do. So I'm taking it and I'm starting off at the lash line and I am deepening along the lash line right over the top of exposed, that color fix color that we put on there to start adding a little bit of that depth. So I'm going to just keep working in at the lash line with soft little tapping motions. I'm not flicking back and forth because I don't want to flick any color on the inside corner of the eye along the nose or up onto the temple. I'm picking up a tiny bit of product at a time and I am tapping it in at the lash line and into the outer corner of the eyes. And by doing these soft tapping motions, you are going to get a more precise application. It's not going to be as messy. You're not going to have to worry about getting it all over the place under the eye. But what you can do is take the clean eyeshadow brush that you used to apply the loose powder with and just kind of soften up any edges. So we're going back and forth between that clean brush to soften up any edges and the more small detailed brush dipped into that matte brown to start shaping out more of the eye and adding dimension. Now, the other trick that you can use if you are worried about getting it underneath the eyes and you want a really crisp, clean under eye area is you can take a tissue and put it up underneath the lash line to catch any fallout. I don't really do that very often because I use the small detailed brush and I pick up just a tiny little bit at a time and I pat it into the eye area before softening it out. So I'm applying just where I want the product and I'm applying just a little bit at a time. So now I'm just going to take a little bit underneath the eye, softly along that lash line. And because I haven't done the concealer yet, I'm not too worried about if I do get a little bit of fallout. I can go back in and I can add in some concealer and I can clean that up. We've just put that thin little layer of the neutralizer underneath there, that color corrector. So now when I have the depth around the crease and the outside corner of the eye that I like, I'm going to start adding some depth at the lashes, and I'm going to give it a little bit more of that soft smoky effect. So I am taking the color Dimensional Brown in the Artist pencil from Makeup Forever, and I am applying a little bit at the lash line and then going in with this My Kitco brush, and I am smudging it out. So I'm taking a little bit of eyeliner, applying it along the lash line, and then smudging it out with the brush, applying a little bit at a time, working it into the lash line, and I'm going to build that up in intensity until I get it to the point where I like it. Every so often, I'm going to go back in with that lighter shade and just kind of tap onto the ball of the lid and soften along that edge for any places where I feel like I've maybe started to get it up a little too high, or if I want to just add a little bit more brown with the eyeshadow, kind of just going back and forth between those two and getting a soft diffused look to the lash line that I really love. And so we're going to switch over to this eye and we're going to repeat the process. We're going to take that liner, smoke it into the lash line, go back and forth, and start layering in that product between the liner, smudging it out, going back and forth, adding a little bit of color to the ball of the lid or a little bit of the brown eyeshadow over the top of the liner. We want it to keep going back and forth in thin little layers and softening, softening, softening throughout the entire process. Now, if you're worried about the eyeshadow not lasting or the eyeliner not being waterproof, we are going to set all of that at the lash line in place with a few drops of Duraline. And of course I hold my hand in front of the camera here, but I put just one little drop onto the metal palette, and I'm going to dip in a little detail brush from my Kitco. It's a soft little pencil style brush, and I'm going to just kind of start to lightly tap over the lash line. And what this does is it creates a waterproof layer on top of the eyeshadow and on top of the eyeliner so that you don't have to worry always about using a waterproof product. The Artist pencils from Makeup Forever are not waterproof, but I like them for a smoky lash look because they blend really, really beautiful. So I can layer them with eyeshadows and then set everything in place. Now we're going to go in with Blackout from Color Fix from the Danessa Myricks and a flat little eyeliner shader brush, and I'm going to tap it in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to work this into the lash line. I'm not creating another eyeliner look. The eyeliner look is coming from the eyeliner and the eyeshadow that I previously applied. But what I want to do is press this in between the actual eyelashes. I want to add a little bit of that black there, a little bit of that depth. It's going to help to define the eye, and it's going to give a little bit of depth so that the lashes naturally look a little bit thicker and a little bit fuller. Okay, so I'm going to take that and I'm just going to dab it in and press it in. Now, if it has started to work its way up into the lash line and it is starting to look too sharp, too contrasty, I'm just going to press it back into place and soften it with a little tiny detail brush. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to repeat the process right onto the other eye. Here I got a little bit underneath the eye, so I am just kind of cleaning up and softening everything out before I do the other eye. Okay, so now I am ready to start doing mascara. This is one of the ones by Maybelline. I feel like they are definitely one of the best mascaras out there. I love that it's drugstore because I go through so much mascara. that I don't have to worry about doing a high-end brand. And my technique for getting this without getting any clumps is to take the disposable and rub it along the applicator and gently pick some of it up. And I kind of massage it all over the applicator there to get a nice even finish on my disposable. Sticking it in the tube, I find picks up just a little bit too much product and it's wasteful. Now, what I'm doing is my secret weapon. I take the eyelid and I very gently roll the eyelid back and up to expose the base of the lashes. But since her eyes are closed, she is not going to freak out that there's something coming in at her eye and try and squeeze her eye shut. We're not going to have to worry about her eyelid fluttering or blinking or getting anywhere. And I'm just taking a little Q-tip and I'm just kind of softening up any little areas where I feel like maybe there's a little too much product or it's starting to settle or crease a little bit. Now we are ready to apply her false lashes, so I'm just going to trim the outside corner, and the little bit that I trim off, I'm going to apply on top and kind of just press those two layers together. I'm not doing it all the way in the outside corner, I'm doing it in just a little bit. It adds a little bit of extra depth and a little bit of extra dimension. Now that my glue has set and we're ready to apply, I'm taking tweezers and again, I am very gently rolling the eyelid up a little bit to pull the skin away from the base of the lash and give me a smoother line to apply the lash on. And I'm just using my tweezers to settle everything into place and making sure that I'm getting my lash band right up against the base of the lashes. And it doesn't take a whole lot. I'm just kind of pinching the lashes together to make sure that everything is all lined up and settled really nicely, and then lifting up in the outer corners from underneath to make sure that it is not laying against the bottom lashes, so that way when she goes to open her eye, it won't be sticky. All right, and I always have her open her eye and look up, and any little bit that maybe sticks, I use a blunt-ended tweezer to kind of just gently separate. And again, we're doing the exact same thing to the other eye. And on this one, the inner corner was kind of a little bit higher when I had her open her eye. So I'm going back in and I'm just kind of moving it around before it's completely dry, making sure that everything's right in at the base of the lashes, having her blink, move her eyes, roll them around a little bit, because I want to make sure that they're really super comfortable and there's nothing poking. If there's something that's poking her a little bit, these blunt tweezers that are used for applying the underlash clusters are really good because you can take that and they're gentler. You don't have to worry about accidentally kind of pinching or poking. The tip is really soft and blunt, and you can kind of use that to maneuver the lash around. And what I do is I take it and I kind of like pinch and squeeze the bottom lash, her natural lash, and the falsies together so they kind of stick a little bit and they blend together a little bit more. And in between, every time I move something, I have her open her eyes and move her eyes around to make sure that there's nothing that is poking her or uncomfortable. Now the very last step is to cover up any of the glue at the lash band. Even though I used a clear glue, they can dry and have a little touch of shine to them. So I want to make sure that everything at the lash line and along the lash is really matte and black, so that way we don't catch the light in any of the photos and you see a little bit of the glue. So I'm taking a very thin eyeliner brush, tapping it into the black from Color Fix, and I'm going over it. Now, what I just told her to do was, with her eyes closed, look down at her shoulder, and what it's going to do is it's going to smooth out the inner corner of her eye and allow me to get in there where I don't make a mess. Now, for the under eyes, before we go in with concealer, we want to just take a Q-tip and pull out any concealer that has started to settle into the under eyes. And now I'm going to take some of the Vanish Airbrush concealer from Hourglass, and I'm going to apply that to my complexion tray here, just a tiny little bit, and then I'm going to pick up a fluffy eyeshadow brush, and I'm going to use that and mix it into the foundation. I want to really kind of blend those two together. I find sometimes if you put the concealer alone, it doesn't blend in quite as well. So I mix a little bit of that with my foundation to get a really flawless blend. And I'm applying just a little bit to the inner corners. And now I'm taking a fluffy brush, again, one of the Real Techniques dupes, and it's clean, and I am just sweeping. I am gently blending and sweeping that color out, diffusing the pigmentation and tapping it in with my finger. Now, if I need any additional along the hollow of the eye or a little bit closer up underneath the lash line, I'm applying it. And then again, going back in with that fluffy brush to sweep and diffuse it. It's going to prevent you from applying too much product, and it's going to give a really soft airbrush finish every single time. So again, same thing on this eye, tapping that product in and then buffing and sweeping everything out with that fluffier brush. And then I'm just going to spot conceal any little areas maybe on the side of the nose or around the mouth or anywhere that I feel like it needs just a touch of concealer. Again, I'm going to do that same technique where I tap it in with that small detailed brush and then fluff and blend everything out with the larger brush. It's going to give that airbrush kind of finish every single time. I like this technique rather than going in with a really heavy foundation and trying to conceal everything at the beginning of the process. Now, the last step is to take a little bit of that eyeshadow again and just soften up the edge. And just like we did with the eyeliner, we're going to go back and forth, a little bit of shadow and then that concealer to make sure that there's a really soft, diffused edge between the two. Last but not least, I am going to go in and I'm going to set everything into place with some loose powder. I put it in these little precision point bottles because I can apply just a little tiny bit. And again, I'm using another one of those little trays there, and I'm picking it up with a triangular velour puff. And that is going to allow me to dip it into the powder and not have to worry about cross-contaminating with a jar. And I'm getting it nice and even on the surface, starting at the inner corner, and I'm just tapping and pressing everything into place, picking up a little bit more as I go. And I want to set these under eyes with a very light layer of powder, and then again around the center of the face. Now, the foundation that I used is a self-setting foundation, so I'm not going to go over the top of this with any setting spray. And because of the proper skincare and because I know my product formulations, I don't need to worry about this not lasting all day. I have lightly layered all of my products. I don't need to go in with setting spray. I don't need to go in with heavy amounts of powder, and I'm not gonna have to worry about this not lasting. But because this is a dewy, glowy kind of look, I don't wanna overly mattify. So I'm gonna be really sparse with this powdering. Now it is time for lips, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove that lip mask with a clean doe foot applicator and get it ready for the lip products. I am using Endless Cacao from Makeup Forever, one of their artist pencils, and I'm going to use this to lightly overline the lips and give a little bit more dimension. So we already added a little bit of contouring with that Rare Beauty liquid contour, but I want to add just a tiny little bit more. So I'm going to slightly overline the lips. And how I do that without worrying about getting a wiggly line or it looking too obvious and unnatural is I have them keep their mouth closed. And this is going to give me an idea of what the mouth looks like at rest when they're not stretching it out or trying to hold it out in a stretch position. I know with some people it gives a smoother line, but I'm doing a soft diffused lip liner here because I'm wanting it to be a little bit more of shadow rather than adding color. So I keep the lips closed so I can see the natural shape of the mouth and follow along the lip line. I'm going to go up with the top and again, just ever so slightly past the lip line. If you want to think about it this way, put the tip of the lip liner on the actual edge of the lip and then let it slightly roll off. That way you're not going too far past. And as you can see, as I'm starting to draw it on, you can see it starting to build up that dimension. I like to start with the outside corners and get that fuller line from the bow of the lip to the corner to see how that looks. And you can see I'm tapping things out because I want it to be a really nice, soft, diffused line. So again, in between each of these steps, we always want to make sure that we're blending, we're keeping things soft and diffused because this whole look is supposed to be really soft, romantic, and it's supposed to just look like she's got flawless, glowing skin, that sultry, sexy eye, and full pouty lips. After I've got the lip liner to how I like it, I take a doe foot applicator and I'm just going to soften all of that. Instead of using my finger all the time, I'll go in for a little bit more precision with the doe foot and just soften that up and blend it into the lip because I want that dimension and I want that depth. Now is when I have her open her lips so I can make sure that everything is taken into the inner corner. And I'm doing that with the doe foot applicator and not with the pencil because I don't want too much pigment. A little bit too much pigment in the inner corner just makes the inner corners look a little crusty, and it's harder to keep all of that lip color looking soft. Then I'm going to take the Rosewood Glow from Makeup by Mario, and I'm going to scrape a little bit off with my palette knife. And I'm going to pick that up with that doe foot applicator and I'm going to pick up just a little bit, and that's what I'm going to use for her lip color. I don't want anything too pigmented and I want a really plump, glossy kind of look for this makeup look. So I'm going in and I'm applying just a little bit at a time, starting with the center of the lip and working it out towards the edge of the lips and blending it in with the lip liner. I like using doe foot applicators instead of using lip brushes because I feel like it gives a more soft, diffused look and it picks up slightly less product so I can build up thin layers of the lip color instead of putting on a bunch and then having to blend it out. I find that applying multiple thin layers just gives a more natural look and helps the color to last longer. Lastly, I am taking a Q-tip in the inner corners and just making sure that none of that glossy product has started to migrate and that everything stays towards the center of the lip for a full glossy pouty look. That glossy look is also going to help to catch the light and make the lips look fuller without needing to completely overline. And there we go. That is the final look. Thank you so much for watching. I would love if you could like the video and subscribe to my channel for more content just like this.